Did you ever want to create a redeem for your VTuber channel where your avatar is, for example, yeeted away by a UFO? Or maybe want to create a completely custom bonk animation or a headbutt animation or almost any kind of a animation of 3D models that interact with your avatar. Today, I'm going to show you how to use VNyan's prop system to create completely new effects for the application. Hi, it's your friendly neighborhood VTuber Suvi here again with a new tutorial. So today, I'm going to show you guys how to use VNyan's prop system to create a completely new effect. So we're going to create a UFO that flies on top of your avatar and drags you away from the screen, and later on you fall from the middle of the screen down and kind of get yeeted. So, before we get started today, make sure you check out the previous tutorial where we go through how to use VNyan SDK, so you know what Unity versions and so on you need to get started. Anyway, let's get started with the tutorial. As always, when working with VNyan, make sure that you use Unity 2020.3.40. And since we're creating a new prop, make sure that you import the latest version of VNyan SDK to your project before you get started. Since I am not really an artist, we will just be creating a simple, kind of like a UFO-shaped prop today. And we will be adding a simple animation to it. So let's start by creating an empty object to our scene. This will be our container. So let's call it prop container, like so. And now under this, we will create another empty, but let's first set this position to 0. So make sure that your root node is always at the 0 position and 0 rotation. Although VNyan will be overriding this anyway. So now we add another empty here, and let's call that UFO. And we will be building our object under this node. So let's just make a very simple looking UFO. So let's add 3D object, and let's add a cylinder like so. And now we can scale this a little bit. Something like that. And then let's also add a sphere. Okay, and there we have a perfect UFO. Feel free to actually use a 3D modeling tool or buy a ready-made asset or whatever you want instead of using Unity's built-in shapes. Okay, now in addition to just a UFO, we also want to add some kind of beam or tractor beam, or what do you call the beams that come out of the UFO when they abduct people? So let's add something like that as well. Okay, now that we have the objects done, make sure none of them have colliders. So if they do, then remove the colliders. And next, you will want to create the materials. So we're just quickly going to add some materials to these parts. Okay, so once you're done with the materials, the next step is to create the animator for this thing. So we are going to start by setting some kind of default state for our object. So by default, we should hide the beam. The other thing we want to do with the UFO is that when it arrives to the screen, it will be flying from the left side to on top of the avatar. So we could set a default state by moving the UFO to the side. So let's set the position to something like -10 or +10, like so. And we're also going to set the default state to be hidden so that you won't see the UFO all the time. So let's just tick this one like so. And now we're going to create an animator. So go to the root level of your object and then add an animator controller here. And we can do this simply by right-clicking, create, and then animator controller. Yes, let's call it UFO controller. And now just drag that to the root level of your object, like so. Okay, now we will need to actually create an animation for this thing to react to. And we will be able to utilize VNyan's anim_param_link component to pull this off. So to do that, let's first add a new component here. And let's search for anim_param_link and add that to our node. This will basically set a node graph parameter value to an animator parameter value. And to use this, we need to assign this animator to this animator slot. So just drag your root node there like so. And then let's come up with some parameter name. So let's call this UFO effect. And then let's use the same name for the actual UFO, like so. So now we need to add a parameter called UFO effect to our animator. So double click on your UFO controller, and then in the animator view, we are going to go to the parameters. And now let's add a new integer parameter and set the name to UFO effect, like so. Next, we are going to create a state. So right click and create state and empty. And now let's name this to off state. So basically, whenever the UFO is hidden, we will be in this state. Now let's create a new empty and let's call it on state. And this is when our UFO will be flying. Okay, and now we need to create transitions between these. So right click again, make transition, point it to the on state, and we'll do the same back. So right click, make transition, and point it to the off state. And now click on the arrow that goes towards the on state. And first of all, we will be clicking off the has exit time. And then to the conditions, click the plus. It should select your UFO effect by default. Then to the condition, select equals 1. So now if we set the UFO effect parameter to 1, then it will turn the UFO effect on. And now we will do the same for the other side. So click on the other arrow, click off the has exit time, then click on the plus, and then here we're going to put not equal to 1. So if the value is anything else but 1, then we will return back. Okay, next we would need to assign the animation, but we did not yet record that, so let's go record the animation. So go back to your scene, and now make sure you have the animation tab open. If you don't have it, you can get it from the window, animation, and then animation. Now select your main node that has the animator, and now you should be able to click the create button here to create a new animation. And now we can start recording the animation. So you can do this simply by clicking the record button. And in the very first frame, we should make our UFO visible. So select your UFO and click the active status to on, like so. Next, we will want to move some frames ahead. Let's move it to like frame number 30. And we want to move the UFO to be on top of our avatar. And that would be at position 0. So let's just change here position to 0 like so. And now we can wait a couple of frames and we can turn on the tractor beam like so. And what we basically want to do is stop the animation here. So simply end the recording mode. Now go to your project and find the animation that you just saved and make sure that you set the loop time off. This means that it will end at the last frame. Okay, and now let's go back to the animator. And you may see that it may have created a new state here. Don't worry about that. Select the on state and then click on the small dot here and then assign it to the new animation that you just created. Now you can click on the extra one here and click delete to get rid of that. Now you have the animation. It may be a bit fast. You can test this out by going to the play mode. And in the play mode, if you go to the animator, you can see that it is looping the off state. If you click 1, you will see it goes to the on state. Now, if it goes back to 0, it resumes here. Now we could quickly set this to 1 and then enter the scene. And as you can see, it's very fast right now. So we want this to be slower. And we can do this by adjusting the speed here. So let's make the speed to be like 0.2. And we can try this again. And as you can see, it's much better now. So you can leave the play mode, make sure that your parameter is still correct after all the testing. Okay, now that you're done with the UFO on animation, we will also have to create a UFO off animation to make sure that the UFO actually gets turned off when we set the value back to 0. This may be necessary in some cases. So let us again select our main object and then go to the animation. And now we're going to click here on the drop down and then create a new clip. And let's create one called UFO off, like so. And we're going to start recording again. So click on the record. Now our UFO is currently hidden, but we should just set this to correct state. So set it first to on and also set the beam to on. And now click the beam off and then click the UFO off. Now, as you can see, we have now animated both of these properties correctly here. And now let us leave the record mode and again go to the animator. And now we're going to select the off state and we're going to set the animation here, the UFO off. Okay, and now we're finally done with the prop. So you can select it, go to VNyan SDK and export prop and then export it somewhere. Okay, now that you have your model loaded to VNyan, the next step is to load the prop. So go to the props and then simply click the add prop. And now point it to the prop that we just saved. Okay, and now we're going to assign it to our avatar's hips. Now you obviously will not see the UFO right now because the animation is set to make it hidden. So let us go to the redeem settings and let's create a new graph. And let's add a channel point redeem here. And we're going to connect it to our setParam node. And let's type to here the same parameter name we used in Unity. So UFO effect. And let's set the value to 1. And now if we signal this, we should see the UFO come here. And as you can see, here it is. So now we can set the UFO to be where it should be. So just adjust the position until you're happy. And now what we need to do is we also need to set the parameter back to 0. Like so. And also we need to click the show hide prop to make sure that the default state of the UFO is hidden. Because by default, when you load up VNyan, all props will be hidden. Let's start creating the channel point redeem. So what we want to happen is that when we trigger this channel point redeem, the UFO prop will be toggled on and then we set the parameter to 1. So let's disconnect this by right clicking. And now let's give this name UFO yeet. And first of all, we need to add ordered execution node. And the first step is to toggle the prop on. So find the toggle called toggle prop, point it to the UFO, and connect it to the first slot. And then we need to set the second one to the set parameter and make sure you set the parameter to 1. But now we want something to, of course, happen when the UFO arrives here. Let's create a timer. And we could call this a UFO loop. And let's connect it here. Now, this is a timer that would trigger after our UFO has arrived and opened the green beam. So let's wait around 4 seconds. And now, of course, we need to react to this timer. So let's add the timer callback and add the same name, UFO loop. So the next thing is to do something when this UFO loop gets triggered. We are going to use the node called cycler5 split. This is basically a node that every time it executes a socket, then the next time this gets called, it moves to the next one, and so on. So we can use this as a state machine and keep calling the same timer over and over again. So first of all, what happens when the UFO has arrived on top of our head? We should raise our avatar into the air a little bit. Now today we are also going to utilize a new node that was added to VNyan called trigger. So we have a trigger system. So let's use the call trigger. This allows creating functions for us. So we're going to give a trigger name. So let's call this lift to air. And we're going to trigger it now and then connect it. Okay, now let's add the trigger callback node. And to this we're going to type the same name, lift to air. Now we can build whatever happens when this gets triggered. So first of all, we should raise our avatar into the air, and then we should reset the timer to something else. Let's use the object position node, this one. And here we need to specify some node name that exists in your avatar. So my avatar has a root node, so I'm gonna use root. You may need to open your avatar in Unity to find out what node names it has. We're gonna connect that, and to the position X, we're gonna set 0, and same to the position Z, but to position Y, let's set it to 0.5, so our avatar will be lifted into the air, and then smooth time, let's set it to 1 second. And now, of course, we need to reset this loop timer. Let's again add the start timer, or we can duplicate this existing start timer node and just add it here, connect it to this. And how long should we wait until the next stage? Let's wait 1 second and a little bit more, so 1.5 seconds. Okay, so now after this executes, it will then come back here to the timer, and this next output will then be the next socket. Let's again create another trigger, connect it here, and let's call it take away or abduct. So now the next step is that our UFO will fly away while holding our avatar. So let's go and create another trigger callback and type the same name, abduct. And now we want the UFO to move away from the screen. So let's duplicate the object position, and we're gonna keep the same altitude, but to the position X, let's set 10. And smooth time can be 2 seconds. And again, we need to set the timer, so duplicate this one. We're gonna set it to 2 seconds. And what happens after that? We should be somehow yeeted, so it looks like we will fall from the sky to the center of the screen. To do that, we're gonna need a couple stages. So first of all, our avatar should be hidden so that we cannot see the avatar. And then it should be moved to the center of the screen again. And then we should apply yeet that lifts us high enough into the air. And after that, we should make our avatar visible, so then we will only see our avatar falling down. So let's add the next step, which will be to hide the avatar, set it to the middle of the screen, and yeet it up into the sky. So we're again gonna create another trigger, duplicate the trigger there, connect it, and let's call this yeet. And now we're gonna create that callback here. So duplicate that one and call it yeet. Let's use the ordered execution. And first of all, we want to scale our avatar small so that we cannot see it. So we're going to add the bone scale. Let's apply it to the hips, and we're going to set the scale to 0. Like so. Smooth time to 0 as well. Now, if you are working with VRM models, make sure you have tracking connected. Otherwise, yeet effect will not work. Next step is to return our avatar back to the middle of the screen. Basically, we need to call the object position node again. So we're going to duplicate this one. And if we call the object position with the same values that it currently has, then we will remove the overriding position. So we're only going to set the smooth time to 0. And now our avatar should be back to the origin, but it should also be invisible. So next step we are going to do is we're going to set the yeet. Let's find the yeet node. And let's set a value that is high enough to set us into air, so 30. And respawn seconds can be like 10 or something. And then let's connect that to the ordered execution as well. And finally, we need to give enough time for our avatar to fly into the air. kind of off the screen. So let's duplicate the start timer and let's set it to 1 second. So now we finally get back to this fourth socket here. So let's duplicate again the call trigger and let's call it make visible. And now what should happen is that we'll make our avatar visible at this point. So again, let's go add a new trigger callback and it should be make visible. And again, how to do this is we need to toggle this bone scale off. And that is also done the same way. So if the node gets called with the same values, then it gets overridden. So let's duplicate the bone scale node and connect it here. So now our avatar should be visible. Of course, we are going to need to start the timer again so that we will move to the final socket of the looper. So let's set that to like 100 milliseconds. And that should arrive so that our next output will be at the last one. It should basically work already. However, our UFO will probably remain visible. So we're going to have to make it so that our UFO actually gets hidden as well. So to do that, we need to figure out at what stage do we want to hide our UFO. And I think it should be at the yeet stage. So when the yeeting is happening, let's connect to the first part, the set parameter node. And to that we are going to type the UFO effect. And we're going to set the value to 0. Like so. And to the second socket, let's set the toggle prop. And set it to the UFO and then connect it to the second socket. So now our UFO should also become hidden at that point. And we should be able to test this out now and see whether it works or not. So send the signal to the UFO, yeet, channel point redeem. And as you can see, UFO comes, lifts us to air, takes us off the screen, and then we fall from the sky. So the redeem seems to be working. Now we just need to make sure that it actually works the second time. Next output has been set to 0, as you can see. And now let's try redeeming it again. Now there was a quick flash that you saw there. That is something we might still need to address. Our issue clearly here is with the animator, because our off animator was actually at the origin point. This could be fixed in Unity by editing the animation so that it actually puts our model right at the part where the animation on is starting. If you go back to the Unity and you open up your prop container and then from the animations open the UFO off animation. Now as you remember, here we are basically setting the status to off. But what we are not doing is we are not setting the UFO to the position where it is at default. So we are not setting it to the 10 position here. So let's add that to our node as well. So click on record and then we're just going to store this position. So right click on position and add key. So now when we are off, we should also be at the correct position and end the recording. And now let's try export the model again and restart VNyan and it should work then. Okay, once you have restarted VNyan, you can try triggering the specific node again. And as you can see, no flickering of the UFO. It grabs us in the air and takes us away. And then after a while, we will fall down. And when we execute this again, it should not flicker either. So send signal. And as you can see, no flicker again. I hope the tutorial was useful for you. And remember that you can indeed create various kinds of effects with this system. You can create like easier ones that can be like a head pat or just a bonk or something like that as well. You don't necessarily need to actually move your avatar around like we did today. Anyway, the node graph for this specific example as well as that UFO asset are also in the description, so you can download those if you feel like something was missed in the tutorial itself. Anyway, if you want to stay up to date with my latest tutorials, make sure to subscribe and smash the bell button so you get notification for them. And if you run into any questions with VNyan, we have a relatively big community already in the Discord. I highly recommend you join that and ask the questions there. You can also find various kinds of assets and written tutorials and example node graphs there that you cannot get anywhere else. So highly recommend that join the Discord if you have any questions about the application. Anyway, see you next time, guys.